today's topic is about an element of human nature, and it's pretty common. It's not that specific. Uh, and I'm talking about how it's extremely hard for humans to admit they're wrong because they want to be right so badly. They just feel the urge to just overcome every single person in their path to pretty much have a dominant opinion. And some people, find this ridiculous. They're like, I don't have to be right. I can admit that I'm wrong. And kudos to those people because, it's very frustrating to have an opinion you believe so heavily in, right? And then have it shattered by someone who just knows more than you and just has a better depth of knowledge, and then you're forced to be like, oh yeah, you do make a better point, but inside you're like, damn, they make a better point, but it still hurts to have my opinion shattered like that, right? I'm a perpetrator of this. I sometimes punch down at certain opinions because I feel that they're non-essential to the overarching message or overarching ideas that I seek in my media. Let's just take, for example, people that enjoy mainstream shows like Demon Slayer or Goblin Slayer. Not Goblin Slayer, but let's just take Demon Slayer as an example, right? I watched the first episode of Demon Slayer and I was not impressed on any level. And then all of a sudden, this show becomes like a worldwide phenomenon. People are just drooling over this show. And I just thought it was just like, all right, it's probably going to be your average shonen or your average action show, and I'm not interested in that. I mean, I know who the studio is. It's UFO Table. All they do is pretty much Fate nowadays. And they're dropping another male pro tag show with not a lot of interest in it. Like, comparably, a show like Beastars, right, which has a lot of ambition, right? I only watched the first 3 episodes, but like, do you know how hard it is to market that compared to Demon Slayer? And Beastars is a mainstream show. That is incredible how it becomes a mainstream show. You have not a lot of anime specific components to Beastars. You have animals for characters. You have a weird narrative conceit that's not really common. While in Demon Slayer, it's essentially just something we've already seen before, and it's not that ambitious. I mean, you can claim that the animation is top tier all day, every day of the week, but you see what Beastars is doing? Beastars is doing CG, something unheard of in anime conversations because of how appalling most of it is. And Orange Studio, who is famous for their work on Land of the Lustrous and Beastars, and making CGI a conversational point, that is far more than I could ever ask for in terms of a show that offers something that is different from the competition in every way. And yet, it is extremely hard for me to argue in favor of Beastars over Demon Slayer because I haven't even seen the whole show and I can't get a depth of knowledge for it in terms of what it exactly offers in terms of, the actual show itself, and not exactly what idea it presents in the anime industry as a whole. And I want to be right about Beastars. I want to be right, but I'm not willing to put in the time to, be right in that situation. And that's a fault of mine, and it's also just laziness. Laziness is always a quirk in conversations that are research based or even analytically based, right? I had an argument once with my friend about the sort of ethicality of Amazon as a company, right? Basically, Amazon is a company that has a grip on the entire consumer industry, right? There's no goddamn way that anyone's going to overtake Amazon because they have such a great service, convenient service. You can return something from Amazon the next day and they'll give you your money in full if you don't like the product. That is something that you cannot get in today's market easily. You have to go through loops and holes. You have to get, oh, you don't have the receipt? Well, screw you. Oh, you bought this at this specific source, so you have to go back to this specific. No, Amazon is clean, cookie cutter. It's got everything you could possibly want pretty much for the average consumer, right? And it basically trumps over all of these family-owned businesses because they're weak and they can't hold the competition. And that is, an inherent problem with family-owned businesses, not Amazon. Amazon is not, Amazon is probably trying to purposefully get these family-owned businesses out of their way so they can have more room to expand. But it's showing a gradual change in the consumer and how they are willing to not value basically the dedication it takes and the work it takes to keep open a family-owned business, and rather they value convenience and purchasing price, which is easily a better solution. And it's opening doors for those family-owned businesses to expand to something more lucrative for, say, a trade, like plumbing or electricity, or anything that, extermination, right? Something that people need and can't get from Amazon unless Amazon expands to that. In the future, I'd like to see Amazon expand to something like that and just get everything in a consolidated service. There's no need for pretty much family-owned businesses anymore. If Amazon has a hold of it, they can hire those families and have them run their stores for them if they wanted to, but they'd be making crap wages. But that's a good thing if you really think about it. Okay, that sounds terrible, but let me explain where I'm coming from with this. Basically, Amazon sets a set rate on your wage for a plethora of places. It pretty much doesn't consider socioeconomic conditions either, which is all right. It's not a great system, but hear me out when I say this. I think that if you have set wages for pretty much everybody in certain services, there's really no room for bargaining and there's really no room for argument anymore. And I feel that's better than having a bunch of places have 200 to 300% of the market price just because they're trying to compete with Amazon or trying to compete to pay their rent and stuff like that. I don't want to be a part of that. That's their job to compete with Amazon and provide a better service. I shouldn't have to pay the extra $300 when Amazon is offering something much better for a much more convenient service. So if Amazon takes a foothold on that and offers the lowest price or a set price across the entire extermination industry, right? I won't have to make a hard decision anymore. Do I want the family-owned business to come in my home and then, not have that Amazon guarantee? If we did a bad job, we'll give you a full refund and, whatever. Like, it could go either way. No, actually, it can't go either way because I'd love to see this reality occur. Complete monopoly over everything. And then all of a sudden, everything is just set in stone and I don't have to worry about, being a consumer as much anymore. I can just, have that part of my life be out of the picture. It's out of the picture for me. I don't have to go through, do I want to go to Ein's extermination service? Do I want to go to Joe's extermination service? No. I call Amazon. I want my house exterminated. Here's the set price that everyone pays. Boom. We're done with it. That's a problem that I don't have to worry about anymore. And I want to be desperately right about this. But, of course, there are plenty of cons to this situation. And I want to be right so badly that it literally hurts. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, I don't even pay for a mortgage yet. Why do I even care about this? I just would like to see it implemented in our society so I could see what exactly it would produce. But, obviously, I can admit to being wrong about this. I can admit that it is a bad reality in a lot of ways, especially giving Amazon, a company who is, not the most ethical company, control over an entire industry or multiple industries per se, and then completely trumping over family-owned businesses. It's whatever, man. But what exactly do I even want from being right? Like, what do people want from being right these days? Like, do you get anything? Not really. You don't get anything. You just get the satisfaction of being right, and sometimes that's enough. That's enough for some people. You want to be right. You want to be set in stone because that gives you power in a way. And admitting defeat is like admitting that you were just inferior overall. Some people are like, no, that's a little bit of hyperbole on your part. Well, I think that is a little bit of hyperbole, but it stands true to me, especially because, like, I've met people who are so stubborn-headed and just set in their ways that they're just not willing to even hear the opposition because they're expecting a result that might not even be there. And that's the problem. The expectation that a result can already be set in stone before the conversation even begins, right? And of course, I am also guilty of this. If I see someone's mean score at like an 8.9, I immediately judge them. I'm like, how can I possibly trust your opinion if you have such an absurdly high mean score? That means you literally just watch something and just give it a 10 or a 9 or an 8, and then you're done with it every single time. Like, that is boring to me, and I don't think I would have a fun time conversating with that person. But there are people that are like that I do have fun conversating with, because they offer insight that is interesting in its own way. And I will admit that I've been wrong plenty of times about what I anticipated to happen with these types of people. Let's just classify them as normies for a second. A normie can offer you a lot in terms of benefit to your opinion because they're from the opposite side of the spectrum. And maybe they consider us normies and us pretentious losers, essentially. Because critics nowadays are just gutted for just being losers, pretty much. Like, oh, you didn't like the movie? Well, sucks to be you. You're a terrible person. You know how hard these people work on the movie? I can understand that. But criticism has always got to have a place in society, or else there's just no room for contrast in society. Like, if everyone just said, oh, why can't you just let people enjoy things? Like, okay, you can enjoy things, but what if someone doesn't enjoy things? And then you call them like, oh, well, you don't like that because, you just only watch these movies that no one's seen before, and you keep preaching about them as if they're the Messiah. Well, they are the Messiah because I said so, and that's my opinion. Revelation, right? Someone has an opinion, that's crazy. I mean, critics most likely are not representing themselves and rather representing the company or person that's paying them, right? That they don't want to stain that relationship, right? They can't talk absurdly bad on a piece and then not have it reflect on the company. That is why I have a problem with modern journalism. Modern journalism has come to a point where pretty much you're just playing for clicks at this point. Like, you give something a low score pretty much, and you're like, yeah, this is a bad product, but I'm gonna paint it so it's not that bad, so we don't get that amount of hate at our company, or stuff like that. They can't make hot takes anymore because it reflects bad. That's what I'm trying to say. And also, this goes true for investigative journalism. Sometimes companies like CNN will not cover the real stories of what's going on. Let's just say Israel-Palestine. Israel just completely eradicating Palestine off the map, and Israel decides to send their reporters in completely preaching this absurd message that Israel is suffering in any way, and it's just absolutely absurd. And investigative journalism is just dead at this point, especially if you're representing a company. Like, can you name like most of the reporters from CNN that are investigative journalists in the Middle East? Not really. I mean, CNN has always had people like Anthony Bourdain, for example, that have represented himself his entire career, basically, even during his no reservations period, and it's just been always him, pretty much. Through Parts Unknown, you can see his entire character, just full flesh and blood. He's not representing CNN, even though he's sponsored by CNN, and that's what I love about that part of investigative journalism. It's when you can just be yourself and represent your own opinion and not represent a company's opinion, or try to tame it a little to be the company in the very sense and not represent yourself. It's just so annoying to see when people do that. And then if you authenticize yourself, essentially, you don't have to admit you're wrong, because I've already created a persona that you understand, you believe in, and then I'm already right to be myself. Right? I'm already right. You don't have, there's no reason to badly be right, or, want to prove to others that you're not wrong. If you've just already created this, I guess, primarily audience that believes in you, and then primarily, also a, just character of sorts. And Anthony Bourdain is not portraying a character. He's being himself in pretty much every single clip or every single episode, every single show he's been in. And man, it's just a terrible loss to have him pass away so early, but it elaborates on my point here that pretty much it's very hard for someone to take an opinion and just sort of not want to tamper with the idea for a little bit in their mind before they even respond. Some people are just quick to respond, but they've already tampered with it in their mind, even in split seconds. They've already be like, I want to respond. I want to create a counterpoint. I want to agree with you. I want to do this. I want to do that with this opinion. They're creating progressive conversation, right? Unless, of course, they just hate you and they're just like, I'm not willing to hear your opinion. Well, screw you. I don't want to talk to you, right? It's whatever, man. But an underlying problem in sort of opinionation these days is clarity of a point. People are willing to go extreme lengths to make their point as detailed and specific as possible for no reason. Literally just to give you useless facts that don't even benefit their own point sometimes. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. People that are just preaching a message and they have like barely any ideas flowing and it's just the same gibberish every single time. And they're trying to make it as clear as possible, but it doesn't come off clear at all. And I have a prime example for this in my own writing. I was in my sophomore year of high school and I turned in an essay and my teacher said, your writing is far too melodramatic. You need to, stop detailing and emotionally hitting on everything you do. Like, you don't need to go to such lengths to explain something. And I felt offended by this. I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about? I love this writing, yeah, man, it's just like, I love my writing so much that, I would defend it to my wit's end because, I think that I provide interesting points and blah, blah, blah. I was a sophomore and I was an idiot, right? I don't know what I'm talking about pretty much. And so I was forced pretty much in order to achieve a better grade, of course, because, I'm there to get a better grade and it's not a room for experimentation in high school. And that's also a problem that pretty much you can't experiment with your writing because it has to be a certain way or a certain prompt. I love teachers that just let you have your own prompt or like, here's a general idea of where your essay should be going, but you can come up with your own prompt, your own thesis. That is the best harboring of creative freedom. It's not quite as creative as it could be and freeing as it could be, but it's a start. It's a better start than having like, I need you to explain how Atticus Finch represents the idea of moral Buddha booba. It doesn't even matter. I don't care about that. What if I just completely did not care about that and wanted to talk about, slavery or something that might be absurd, like the portrayal of women in the story as contrasted to men, right? If I wanted to do that, I just can't. And that's a problem. But aside from that, so story is I changed my writing to be a lot more simple, a lot more concise, get to the point a lot faster. And although I do write like that now because, I've just been practicing writing like that for a very long time, I felt betrayed by my own standards, or I was betraying my own standard of writing because I thought that my previous way was better. And then of course I achieved better grades and I'm like, okay, I'm getting affirmation that this way of writing is better, but I still don't like it. And you can make the argument that, oh, well, if you still like it, you could write like that now. Well, like, I've already explored all the quirks and all of the inner and outs of pretty much how I write now, and I've made it so I like really find it to be appealing to write like that now. And if I were to write melodramatically again and more emotionally based, it would be too tough, I don't think. And I think that I'd have to study a lot more of that writing, which is not what I want to do. I just like concise, simple writing now. And That is the idea of clarity of a point. In a very long-winded example, but basically, people will go to extreme lengths to pretty much justify to themselves, or get some huffing some fat copium, that my way is the premier example of what to do, and anything else is just offensive. And yeah, it's sort of tough to rationalize all this stuff in your mind, because there's really no cure for this type of just like disdain for the opposite opinion. And you could say that, like, oh, well, I'm always open to the opposite opinion. Well, that's not interesting either. If you're always open to the opposite opinion and you take everyone's opinion just like as seriously as you can, I feel that's also stupid. Because if you, well, we'll go back to this normie example for a second. Let's just say the only rhetoric and basically conversations you hear are from a normie-based audience in any type of entertainment, right? And then you go into a critic circle pretty much, and then hear information from them, and you take all their information to heart. Like, there's a clear contrast of opinions, but that's also just like confusing you at that point as to what to believe when it comes to accepting your media. I feel like association is a good idea, but it's not to the point where labels are the essential tool to gratify sort of where you're coming from with an idea. Like, am I a critic? Am I a fan? Am I a fan of animation? Am I a fan of acting? Am I a fan of directing? Like, you're trying to rationalize all these labels to make it seem like you're a part of a group, and then you're trying to pretty much create a identity for yourself, which is not a bad thing, but it's just like, it's all over the place, man. It's all over the place. Which brings me to another point. Pretty much justification of your of a false point, essentially. Sometimes there are conversations where you'll try to justify something that is partly false or is false just for the sake of not being wrong. I've done this before. Veganism is a very popular thing, or vegetarianism, or whatever, just like the practice of not eating meat because you disagree with the industry, or you find it unethical, or there's a plethora of ideas you can have to being a vegan. It's your culture, blah blah blah. And sometimes you get people, well, let's just not say people, because I've had this happen to me personally. There was a person that asked me, have you ever considered going vegan or vegetarian? You should, because it's better for the environment, or it's unethical to kill animals or slaughter animals and mass produce them in a way. And then you're like, and they also try to justify it to themselves. They're like, or I guess not justify it to themselves, they're trying to ease you into it and say that, like, oh, I agree that you should be able to hunt animals on your own territory or whatever, and if you use everything, that's totally fine. I just disagree with the mass production and slaughter of animals in an unethical way. And that's how they get you in, or get you to maybe switch. But here's the idea that I always present, which is partly false, right? I say that humans are an exponentially growing species. Like, there's literally no stopping us. We will continue to grow. We will never decline pretty much at this point, unless something extremely catastrophic happens and we're no longer able to reproduce. We will never be on a decline, but that is the idea that I'm going with when I come at veganism. It's that eventually it's going to reach a point where we cannot possibly produce enough cattle or enough, meat in general to sustain the amount of people that want to eat it in this, let's just say, America, right? There's no possible way that we're going to be able to keep up. There's only a set amount of farms, and maybe more farms are built, but not at the rate that humans are created. And eventually meat is going to reach a point where they have to increase its price to an absurd amount, basically because of the scarcity of the product, because they can't produce enough. Supply and demand at its finest, but except that they can't supply enough because it's a living animal and they have to raise it. They have to create a situation where it's ready to be given to the general public for consumption, and the consumer will pay these outrageous prices to get meat because it's delicious, to some people. And that's what I argue to my vegan friends. If they ask me why don't I eat meat, it's because I want to eat as much meat as possible so that when it reaches an absurd price, I'll be like, it's not really worth it to eat it at this point because it's $80 for a slice of ribeye, right? And at that point, I'll become a vegan. I tell them that if it ever comes to that point, I'd rather just not pay the absurd premium for meat and then just become a vegan. But here's where the partly false position comes in. It's when you rationalize it or I rationalized it, and then aside from that, my real opinion on the subject is that meat is delicious, right? I love eating meat. If I could, I would never give it up. But for the sake of my friend who's a vegan, you have to be proper, or I guess respectful to their opinion. And I do respect their opinion. But I do think meat is delicious, and I should be able to consume it for as long as I can, but it's just not possible. And that's where the partly false thing comes in, because I truly believe that eventually meat will reach an absurd premium if human growth is exponential, and obviously it probably is. And some people, I should say, try to rationalize falsehoods, and I just wanted to be right in that situation or be on the same level as them, because I don't want to fight a losing battle. Like, although I do think that the consumption of meat is unethical at its current point, because most of our meat is made in like these absurdly mass-produced farms and stuff like that, but I just desire to be right. I desire to be on the same level as someone, because there's a level of triumph, or not triumph, but interest that can be brought to your character at that point, and also satisfaction with your own self that you're able to uphold a conversation or uphold a certain standard, and you have nothing to prove to anyone. Pretty much, you're an adult or you're somebody. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You can pretty much only prove stuff to yourself. But is it really worth it? You got to justify it. I think it's worth it. I love proving people wrong. For them to come back at me with information that I never saw before, and then I'm wrong. I think that's an interesting dynamic. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. Criticism is my mainstay. Love that thing. But yeah. I want to wrap it up here with a final idea. A final idea about desire. I've pretty much set this up as a benchmark, not an idea. Living without desire isn't living. Just think about that for a second, because essentially, if there's no goal or no purpose to day-to-day conversations, day-to-day waking up, doing jack diddly, right? If you don't desire to triumph over someone in an opinion, if you don't desire to basically achieve greatness, or you want to achieve the bare minimum, those are still desires at its very heart. And if you really think about why we have desires, it's just sort of built into survival instinct. Everyone pretty much has a desire to live. Some people don't. And, that's unfortunate, but it's built into us already, and you can't really get rid of it. There's a desire for most things in this world. And for me, I see many desires in my life. I want to essentially find as many as possible and document as many as possible, because then I have something to latch on to. And if I ever lose most of my desires, I'll still have a lot to fall back on, because I have basically a list or a documentation of everything everything I value and everything I can strive for if I'm even in the worst place possible. And that's what I think everyone else should do. But, you know, some people don't feel that way. Is that a hot take? I don't really think it's a hot take. I think everyone thinks that way pretty much. Maybe I'm just like one of the few outliers, you know, quirky like that. You know what I'm saying? I'm a girl boss building my own empire. But yeah. I think that's gonna do it. Yeah, thanks for watching. And hopefully I don't be gone for like 4 more weeks again. Smile.